Good evening, and thank you for joining us in this webinar. We will start about 7:03, giving enough time for the others to join in. Thank you. We'll be back.
All right.
All right. Again, good evening. Thank you for joining us for today's session, The Growing Brain. It is the Communication and Language Development Milestone from Birth to 3. My name is Natasha Irise. Along with my colleague, we are happy that you have joined us for this session. And a little bit about myself is that I have been in the early childhood education field for the past, for over 15 years. I taught early Head Start and VPK. I am a class observer and trained a trainer. My favorite thing to do during my downtime is really singing song and singing to choirs and meditate. I am here and delighted to be presenting with my colleague Anna Avalos Atkinson, who will present herself. Take it away, Anna.
Thank you, Natasha. Yes, welcome everyone. We are so happy that you are here today joining us. Yes, my name is Anna Avalos Atkinson, and I have been in the early childhood field for over 30 years as a classroom teacher, curriculum specialist, ed coordinator, and I have worked in private school settings as well as Head Start programs. I currently work as a coach for the ELC of Broward along with my colleague. But I do provide support directly to VPK providers on improving their interactions with children. I have 2 adult children of my own, and I have 5 cats at home that keep me very busy. I am definitely thankful that you're here today and absolutely appreciate your time. And we hope that this session will be both engaging and interesting. So thank you for joining us.
especially for during this weather, right, Anna?
Absolutely,
Going
absolutely.
outside, yes. A little bit of next, okay, a little bit of a housekeeping webinar. Well, you will click on the orange rectangle with the white arrow in order pointing to the panel in order to click it left or right of your screen. Click on it. If you have any questions to show, that will show below that you can also go ahead and type in your questions and comments. Your certificate will be emailed to you after this training. To download the handout, please click on the handout triangle shown below on the panel. You will be able to download it on your computer for later use or print it out. And for comments as well, you can type it. So attendance credits. All ELC trainings are for in-service hours only. Your training certificate will be emailed to you within 24 hours after the conclusion of this webinar to the email address you used when registering for this session. In order to be marked as attended, you must log onto a computer and download the GoToWebinar app on your phone. Just calling in does not register your attendance and you will not receive a certificate if you are not and will not be marked as attended. If we cannot see you, you cannot see us. Upon registering for this webinar, you receive a pre-test of 3 questions. We ask that you complete this webinar. After completing this webinar, you will receive the post-test and the evaluation training. So please complete that, and then you will be receiving your certificate via email. Well, a little bit about 0 to 3. Since 1977, 0 to 3 has advanced proven power of nurturing relationship by transforming the science of early childhood into helpful resources, practical tools, and responsive policies for millions of parents and professionals and policymakers. 0 to 3 plays a key role in ensuring that babies and toddlers get a strong start in life by supporting parents with practical resources that helps them to connect more positively, deeply, and continuously with their babies. Professionals with knowledge and tools that helps them support healthy early development, as well as policy holders and advance comprehensive and coherent policies which support and strengthens families, caregivers, and infant toddler professionals. Their website is www.03.org. Please check them out. They have tons of research for providers to take advantage of. Now we are seeing the Growing Brain. The Growing Brain is the training curriculum for early childhood professionals. It focuses on development of children ages newborn to 5 years old. It focuses on the brain and its role on early development. It links the brain, body, and behaviors. It focuses on affective neuroscience, which is the science of emotions in the brain. It addresses areas such as the structure and functions of the brain factors and experiences that affects the brain and connections between the brain, language development, and sensory functioning. It comprises of 7 units. The first unit is the basics of the growing brain. Unit 2, the factors affecting brain growth and development. Third, communication and language development, which we'll be seeing today. Fourth, cognitive and executive functions. Fifth, social emotional development. The sixth is understanding behaviors. And the seventh is everyday play. Today's session will focus on Unit 3, which covers communication and language development. And our focus is communication milestones from birth to 3 years old. Our learning objective is that you will understand the milestone in children, communication milestone in children from birth to 12 months, understand communication milestones in children from 12 to 36 months, review strategies for supporting language skills in your young children. Now, for those of you who joined us in our last session, we every time that we meet together at the end of each session, we ask that you take something away and implement in your classroom and tell us a little bit about it next time we see. So the question we did ask last time we were together is that what are some things that you might consider doing differently to support healthy brain development and the care of for the children in your care? So that was the question we asked. So we asked that you please take 3 seconds to add to the chat. What is it that you did differently after following this the session that we did last 2 weeks ago? For example, providing more effective interaction. Did you consider doing that in your classroom with the children you care for? Please provide that to us. Were you intentional? Did you provide individualization time to build relationship? What did you do? Is there anything on the chat box, Anna?
I see some providing open-ended materials.
Okay.
Oh, and we also talked about better nutrition. I see some
Yes, we
people,
did.
yeah.
So because we know nutrition affects the
Yeah.
growth, right?
And I see more talking to children during tasks, like during diaper changing. That's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah, and interaction at many times, right? So meaning throughout the day. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Did anyone change their sleeping pattern, or change anything in regards to providing tip and ways for children to take nap and sleep more? Because we know sleep is one of the factors that affected the brain.
Right, we did talk about that last time.
Yeah.
Better nutrition as well.
Okay.
Yeah, creating a positive classroom environment.
Yes.
Yeah. And open-ended questions. Yeah, so open-ended materials and open-ended questions. Very good.
So we are very, very happy to know that you guys are taking back some things that we have said and implementing it in your classroom and making change. And that's what we aim to see happen every time we come and provide the information. So now that we have reviewed the reflexive activity, we will move on to this unit, which is, and we will start with our poll. And the poll question is, some ingredients for healthy brain growth and development are routines, relationship, and responsive interaction. Is that a true or false statement? We will launch a poll. So please take a minute to answer that question. Some ingredients for healthy brain growth and development are routines, relationship, and responsive interaction. Is that a true or false statement?
All right, let's see.
Okay.
Sharing.
People are voting?
People are voting, 41% so far. Okay, so if you
Awesome.
all will remember, this has something to do with the content that we've reviewed so far, right? In the
Yes,
first couple
yes.
So, yep. All right, keep them coming. Keep those votes coming. True or false? Okay, still collecting responses. All right, I think we're good to close. All right,
We're
ready for
good?
the results, Natasha?
Okay. Well, ready.
All righty, closing, and I am sharing.
Submit. Yes. Oh, wow.
Wow, awesome.
Awesome. 96% of you have answered correctly. Yes, it is a true statement. For those of you who were with us in Unit 2, we went over these key ingredients, right? And how important they are in our in brand growth development. And for the 4% who voted for, who said false, we will see the importance at the end of this session as well. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for taking the time to vote or
Mhm.
answering the poll and questions. Now, looking on the other side of the poll question, we see 3 A words: allow, adapt, and add. As your child lead, you allow the child to lead you. You adapt to share the moment, and you add new experience and words. Keep that in mind. So, and when we do that, let's read together this quote on the slide. It says, the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. It is by Peter Drucker. He's an author and management expert. What does that say to you? What does that quote speak to you? Please share in the chat. What did you get from that quote? About 3 seconds.
Mhm.
And looking at the infant eyes and lip, it is speaking, right? It is something, but it's, even though it's nonverbal, but it is speaking.
Yeah. Still communicating.
Mhm.
So how do we figure that out, Natasha? What's going on?
Because his eyes are attentive to something, right? And his
Mhm.
mouth is open and like almost like drooling type of opening. So
Mhm.
he's communicating.
Right. I see facial cues play into what you
Yes.
say, what participants stated. Any behavior is a message. We must read the message first. Awesome. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It looks like the baby's listening, another person
Yes.
said. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm. So still communicating, right? Because listening is part of communication.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing.
Hmm.
So, which will take us to the next slide. And the title is Communicating Without Words. Communication starts from birth. Children use facial expressions, gesture, and sound that let us know how they are feeling. Communication skills begin to emerge in the earliest month of life, but takes years to fully develop. During this period, children often face challenges and frustration in their attempt to have their needs, ideas, and questions understood. Adults too are challenged to interpret the wide range of sounds, expression, and body movement that very young children use to communicate. Using this as a foundation, let's shift to our focus, okay? That language development and communication skills unfold in children begin at birth, and communication skills unfold in between language development and the brain development. So looking at the boy pointing, he's not yet saying, but he's pointing. So he's not communicating verbally, but he's pointing to something. And the facial expression and the cue and learning to read those cues will allow us to understand and to know what is it that they are saying. That's the nonverbal communicating without words. So the complexity of language input, how rich and descriptive our language is during interactions with children, is a significant factor that influences the development of areas of the brain related to language. Research indicates that very young children are learning from events earlier in life. In fact, these experiences are vital for their language development, and that children's early mastery of language requires learning in the social context. This means that our role as providers who engage with children all day long in a highly social context is critical. The back and forth of language learning mixed input from the and responses by parents and other caregiver, it is a very critical is critical to development. In short, success in school begins in infancy and through interaction with others. Looking at these pictures, we see the social context that happen, peers to peer, joining in, talking and having conversation, and we see adults that are like smiling and at the child's level and taking part into their own play or the activities and communicating thoughts. Reflexive communication. Now, communication skills begin long before young children speaks their first word. In fact, the fetus can hear external sound in utero and recognize and prefer the sounds of the mother's voice starting when she is about 7 month old, pregnant, or 36 weeks into the pregnancy. For those of you who joined us last session, we did talk about how the baby can hear within the utero. Yes. So now let's begin by thinking about how baby communicate from birth up to the time when they are saying their first word. When babies are born, they are not yet able to communicate with intention. They are reflexive communication to share their needs, their emotions state with caregiver. Remember that. So it's reflexive. You can guess what is the difference between intentional communication and reflexive communication. As caregiver, I know you can. Intentional communication means that we are speaking with awareness and with purpose and goal. As adult, we are able to do that, and we do that all the time. We are working to get a specific message across in our conversation partners, and then as we are communicating, right? Babies are not yet able to do that. Their cognitive ability to generate and communicate a message is not there yet. So what they use to communicate is their reflexive communication, includes vocalization, body movement, and facial expression. Those are the things that the baby uses to respond to pleasure and or discomfort. Initially, these are involuntary and in response to a stimulus like being cold or being wet, experience, or passing a gas. So we know when babies are crying because they are wet, they pretty much communicating that need to have a diaper change. And when they are feeling gassy, that's what they doing. What they do is they cry, right? So that's the reflexive communication part. So let's brainstorm together the reflexive communication that young baby does. So in your chat box, please let us know. Tell us what do you see in your while you're caring for children, how they communicate in reflexive way. Crying, for example, when they cry for their needs to be met, they arch their back if they don't want to, if something is hurting or if they want a position, being in that position, they arch their back. So tell us and a quick 3-second in the chat.
Mm-hmm. They move their arms and their legs. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
They look down when they're sad. True. They make sounds with their mouths. Oh, they're smiling. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So all
Babbling.
these are, yes, all these are ways that they are using reflexive communication, moving their arms, moving their legs. If they don't like certain, they'll move that part of their body.
Mm. They moving their face away when they don't want more food. That's true. Mm-hmm. Body language in general, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Some
Thank you
great,
for sharing.
great comments.
Thank you. And as caregiver and parents, we learn these. We learn to recognize these gestures, right? Cues and communication. Yes, we learn to recognize these unique sounds and cues of their own parents and infants and daily caregivers and activities when we are planning. So when we know our children, we know when they are crying, what they are crying for, and the unique sound they are making, whether it be that they are hungry or wet diaper, it's a different cry, right? This takes time. This takes time to carefully observe as baby are using different sounds in these early months of communication. Babies may also use a variety of cries and to communicate various need. Over time, parents and caregiver may notice that baby have a hungry cry, a tired cry, a bored cry. Um, so it is the knowledge, knowing that infant. That's how you end up attuning, knowing what is it that they are crying for. By about 6 weeks old, a baby begins to smile and coos. They also start to smile, and interaction with others called the social smile for this reason, because they start cooing and smiling, like requesting, like it's like an invitation to play or to smile back. Um, by 8 weeks or 2 months, babies are cooing quite a bit, making little sounds, usually vowel sound like or oh, oh. By 3 to 4 months, baby starts to laugh. Um, Beginning at about 6 months, baby produces uh, a more complex set of sounds called babbling. Babbling is when a baby combines a consonant and a vowel sound, such as g, g, d, d, b, ba, or da, da. These sounds still don't have any meanings. What you are hearing is that the baby's practicing the sounds that are used necessary for his or her own language. While babies appears to be helpless and dependent, they are actually very engaged in back and forth interaction with their caregiver. Cues and communication. And what do you think happens if over time parents respond consistently to baby sounds, expression, and body movement? What do you think happens when when a caregiver or parent consistently, like when a baby cries and you already know that this baby is crying for to be fed, and you attend to that need. When the baby cry for this and then you attend, what do you think happened when you as a caregiver attend to that child's need? Share that in the chat.
The child gets a sense of security.
Yes, the baby
Baby.
gets to make
Right.
connection between the sounds and action. The baby cries, oh, I know I'm coming. You have a wet diaper and I'm coming to change your diaper. So the connection is not only that the baby knows that he or she is communicating effectively his needs, but the baby also knows that this caregiver cares for me and I'm willing to communicate with that caregiver.
Absolutely. Someone else said babies forms a trust and know that
Yes,
their needs will be met, which is what you just
yes.
said.
Thank you.
Those
Thank you. A
connections.
sense of trust and connection.
Mhm.
So the foundation, this is where the foundation of intentional communication starts. Learning that the sound that they make, the action that they make elicit a response from another person. So beginning at 2 months, they start doing that. Babies even begin to wait to take turn on the back and forth conversation because they would make a sound and they would look at you waiting for you to give back your own words. With the loved ones, waiting to respond until after the adult has made sound and movement, and then they make another one. So that's the process of intentional communication. And it starts as early as 2 months old.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
So as we look at those pictures, you notice the intentional, whether it be the baby or the adult.
Mhm.
And take time. It's a time. It's not only one way. It's both parent or adult and child taking turn in communicating their needs from infants to toddler. And looking at this, the last picture to my right, I guess your left, where the young man is standing and the man person, I guess our parent or teacher, is at the child's level and holding the hand and showing that the conversation is happening, communication both ways happening.
Mhm.
And yes.
Absolutely. Someone made a comment, a reaction, the way communication and quick response by the adult is very
Hmm.
important.
It's very
And
important. Yes. Thank
important
you
to
for sharing.
learn the ways of each child communicates.
Yes. So again, we're taking back to this comment that the participant made. Adult responses are critical. Thank you for sharing that a bit prior. Another important way that parents support their infants' communication skill is how? Are critical, right? Parent notice the baby vocalization. Um, we know that research have shown that parent makes some response to 30 to 50% of their infant sounds. By as early as 5 month old, babies are learning that not just their cries, but their other sounds elicit a response from their parents. This means they now have what they have the sound to have social effect on their caregiver, meaning I scream so I can get your attention. um, that makes the sound and more often, and the parents to do something and return. So if you delay in doing and responding, so the baby will eventually continue making that sound to seek for that smile, to seek for that connection that he or she is waiting for. This type of back and forth conversation with the baby producing non-cry sound and parent response as has an effect on the children's long-term developmental outcome. In general, the more responsive parents are to the baby's vocalization, the larger baby's vocabularies are at 15 months.
Right. And it's important to note also, Natasha, the opposite, right? So what happens
Yes,
when we don't
yes.
respond to babies?
Mhm.
So that's important to keep in
So
mind.
when adults do not respond, so it shows that And I think earlier, and I forgot to talk about the the note we had on our pictures that says the sound that we hear,
Mm-hmm.
on the voice that you, let me read it because I'm gonna, the way we talk to our children becomes their inner voice.
Mm-hmm. That's the quote that
Uh,
we have at the
that's a
beginning.
quote that we have on our first slide. So
Mm-hmm.
usually we always have a quote that really speaks to us for that particular session, and I didn't say it earlier. So again, if we don't respond to their need, to their bid for communication, it says something to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a negative way, and we don't want that.
Exactly. And I have a participant that says the more we speak constantly to infants helps to build their literacy and language skills. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Great point.
thank you.
Great point.
Parenthèse. I'm gonna say it in French because I can. Parenthèse is is
Sounds
my way of saying it. Because if I don't say parenthèse, I'll say something else. Another important way that parents support their infants' communication skill is how they talk to their babies. That's a parenthèse. Try to imagine you are holding an incredible, adorable baby. Now pretend that you are taking that baby, and what are some of the things you might say to that baby? And how do you say it? Think about it as caregiver, as parent. What do you say? What should you hear yourself say to that baby? Okay. So sing a song, expressing, using exaggerating, exaggerated voice, using shorter, simpler, and repetitive statement, and tendency to use the third person. For example, mommy's going to make your bottle. Mommy's going to change your diaper. And being excited and saying, instead of saying, or mommy, instead of say, I love you, mommy loves you. That's two different way of saying it, right? I love you. But when I'm looking at that adorable baby, it says, mommy loves you. It's a different way of saying it. So as you listen to your self-talk to the baby, how would you describe your speech? So we say this to pretty much for you to rethink of how indeed one we use when we use words with infants, how we use them and how frequently do we use them. This type of language is known as parenthèse because it includes the type of speech pattern that parents and caregiver naturally use most frequently and with young children. Although we all call it parenthèse, anyone can use this type of speech with babies, including teachers, home visitors, and family members, such as grandparents, and we use them. So we just didn't know that there was a parenthèse word for it, describing how the speech, the tone that we use for with children, and and providing them with the language communication skills that they need to build on. So parenthèse is used around the world. It's not only here that I'm saying parenthèse. I guess it's a what? Yet no one teaches adults to talk like this. It's not taught to us, but it's how we seem to do quite unconsciously. And that is a good thing, as baby will typically respond to these widened eyes and expression and direct gaze to adult using infant direct speech. So you are using infant direct speech when you do using parenthèse to speak to children. Why do baby prefer parenthèse? What do you think? It may be because baby process visual and auditory information more slowly, and when parents exaggerate their facial expression and voices, it provides more input to help babies tune in to what the adult is saying. Baby notice speech pattern uses by their parents and caregiver, and research shows that the uses of parentheses affects the stimulate the brain. It affects and stimulate the brain. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Babies who listen to their mothers using parentheses even while they are asleep experience increased blood flow to their frontal area of the brain. And we talk about the frontal lobe, it's the executive function, correct? Last time we went over. But we don't use parentheses forever. You notice I was going to say it in English, and then we don't use it forever. In fact, we use typically peaks between 4 to 6 months old. When a baby is 4 to 6 months old, that's when we use parentheses. Gradually, we decrease over time until children are about 2 years old. So the pattern of parentheses seems to help babies with discriminating vowel sounds and syllables, as well as segmenting and recognizing words. That's what we are doing when we are using parentheses to help babies communicate. Okay, a little glitch right there. So parentheses. So remember what we just said, what areas of the brain that really it affects. Researchers have shown that babies' brain react to language found that the motor part of the brain lights up, which is the cognitive part of learning. It lights up when the baby listens to speech sound, indicating that they are trying to mimic and respond to our sounds. Researchers have also shown that parentheses is a good way to promote both babies' growing social skills and language skills. Parentheses may also increase brain activities and attention to important or meaningful words during the parent-child interaction. In general, the research support the ideas that infant-directed speech plays an important role in language acquisition. In fact, one important research studies find that the more babies heard parentheses at 12 months old, the more they babbled, and the larger their vocabulary was by 24-month old. So remember the brain discussion we have in the last previous session. So how interaction affects the way we children build communication skills. Gaze and joint attention. Looking at this picture on the slide, we know that another important communication strategy that baby uses is their gaze. Many parts of the brain are involved in processing what we see when we gaze at a person or objects, including specific region of the temporal and amygdala. So looking at this picture, we gaze and joint attention. It could be that the adult gaze to the objects or the child, either or. The child can gaze and the adult join into the gazing, or the infant gaze and then the adult continue on that gazing to joint attention. When talking to babies and adult, it often refers to nearby people, objects, and animals looking or gazing. When adult is gazing, it gives a good cue about meaning to the baby. And joint attention is sharing something that that is interest with another person at the same time. So when we look at this picture, we see that the ability to follow an adult gaze begin at approximately 6 months old. By 10 to 11 months, the baby mastered joint attention. Amazing at imagine that a baby who shift his gaze at a colorful of a shell. What would you say to that baby? Where would you take that baby in regards to the gazing that the as the baby gazed at the shell and pointing at the shell and saying g, g, what do you say? Please share that in your chat box. If you see a child gazing at a shell and saying and pointing at it, and um, what would you do? Okay, so you would take the baby, I see, you would take the baby closer to the object and pretty much provide words, provide information about the object, maybe having the object closer to the baby for the baby to be able to, if it's safe, for the baby to be able to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I see someone says, ask the baby, do you see that pretty shell, right? So describing the item.
Describing, labeling and describing the object. Yes.
Yeah, looking at it and showing him the object itself.
Indeed. And so you, as the baby gaze into something, you join in into the gazing and showing interest as well and providing information to that baby. That's exactly correct. This little vinaigrette illustrates that the power of joint attention, which is the baby's growing ability to use behavior, gazing, pointing, vocalization to respond to or initiate an interaction with another person another person about a toy, object, or activity. So that's what we are doing. It involves three elements that the baby and adult and the object. So the elements are the baby, the object, and the adult. So since you're the adult, you're providing the words and the description of the object. Joint attention is different than seeking attention. Joint attention is all about sharing something of interest with another person. So the baby's interested in the doll. I'm interested in the doll as well. And then we are talking about it and we are exploring that doll together. In the vignette, the baby was initiating joint attention when the baby pointed to the shell, correct? Encouraging her caregiver to share the experience of gazing at the shell. It can also be that the bid for attention, joint attention, is likely that the teacher or the caregiver is the one that brings the baby towards the object. Just keep that in mind.
Right, and someone commented that after bringing closer the object, they can touch it and probably continue
Yes.
that conversation.
So another example, it could be like you have a baby, you're standing at the window in the truck, or you're sitting down and you hear the garbage truck passing by and it's making that sound, and the baby is cannot see the truck yet but can hear the sound, and it will be that the adult will take the baby closer to the window and to really share that experience, the object, and having that conversation. You see the truck, this is a garbage truck, and then providing the words and experience to that child. Thank you for sharing again. So we're going to see we have already seen the power of joint attention, right? So we know that joint attentions first began to emerge at about 10 months old, and it's usually mastered by the end of the first year. This is right about the same time frame that babies begin to communicate with intentions or with specific message goal in mind. Recent research shows that joint attention initiated by others, like parents or caregiver, activates the visual attention and social processing areas of the baby's brain. Joint attention initiated by the baby's activities areas activates areas related to social learning, decision making, emotions, and reward process. This tells us that joint attention is important for communication as well as cognitive and social emotional development. Joint attention also support the development of cognitive skills such as learning through imitation and social referencing. Social preference refers to a baby's tendency to look towards his caregiving adult for information about how to interpret situation. So when a child is looking at something and looking at the adult, it's really looking for information and ways to ask, how do I process this information? How do I take, what do I need to know about this? So joint attention is also predicts that children's later communication skills. In fact, gaze following ability to 10 months old has been found to predict children vocabularies at 2 years old. So it is important that we take part of the children and whether they are gazing and joint attention as an adult to take part of that. And looking at these pictures, we see two different pictures. One, the child is pointing, and the other picture, the adult is also within that activity. So we are assuming, or we are thinking that responding to an adult efforts to establish joint attention at 9 months old predicts that the child's perceptive language at 24 months, initiating joint attention using gaze to direct an adult's attention to an object at 9 to 12 months old, and at 12 to 18 months old predicts that an infant's expressive language skills at 24 months old. This research tells us that caregiver participation and joint attention is critical to helping to stimulate healthy brain and language development. So the first one, we notice that the child is pointing. So it is the child's pointing and attention, pointing and requesting to the joint attention. And the other one is the adult really joining the attention and the activity and helping stimulate the healthy brain by providing information and being at the eye level, being part of the play of that child. So it could be either or. It could be the adult or the child bringing that recognition into the joint attention, into an object to learn about it. It also reminds us to follow the baby's lead, right?
Absolutely.
And interest by showing him or her something interesting in the world and around you, and helping him or her build really important brain connection. Now we're gonna watch this video, which is really a recap of everything we have talked about. Take a look at it and take some notes, and when we come back, we will discuss what we have observed, what you have observed. Okay, so what did we see? We saw communication skills that babies are learning during the first year. We saw the the um, the adults are attentive and on the child's level, and they are she is taking part of the play and then repeating what the child is saying. The older person who was reading the book, he used parentheses, he used parenthèse by changing the way he was reading the book. What did you see, Anna?
Well, I definitely saw, the playing with the sounds, like you just mentioned, reading to the baby. You mentioned that in your part of the presentation, describing actions. I saw as well. Um, some participants are commenting happiness, so definitely, a lot of joy as they're interacting with the babies. Um, yeah, we saw different ways to communicate with them, so definitely, encouraging that two-way communication.
Yes,
Noticing the facial expressions, right, and the and
yes,
the and the gestures of the babies, as you mentioned earlier too.
and the take
The turn taking,
turn
absolutely.
taking.
And I
Yes,
saw some of that parentage, right, the high pitched sing-songy voice
yes,
that that
yes.
that adult was using. So it definitely works. As someone is saying, the baby loves the sounds when someone talks back at them. They were using excited talking voice. Yes, that parentage really does work. They really react to that, right?
Mhm.
Excellent. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank you for sharing.
All right.
So, Anna, so
That's
now
it.
we go, I pass it on the baton to Anna. We're going to be a great job going over the milestones. Continue on with that, the training. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha, and thanks for doing such a great job providing us with all that information. That's a
Yes.
lot, right?
No,
It is a lot
yes.
of information to take in, but again, for our experienced teachers and even our new teachers, just engaging with the children is so important, and you see how they react, right? And it's just interesting to note the effect that those effective interactions are having on that brain growth and development, right? Because that's what we're talking
Yes.
about here. Awesome. So yes, so Natasha mentioned that I will continue now with the communication milestones, okay? And so young children are attuned to the names of the people they love and fairly rapidly learn to recognize and pay attention to those familiar names. So beginning at about 6 to 8 months old, babies will look for family members or pets when their names are spoken. This is an early receptive language skill, right? Like Natasha just mentioned. They also recognize words for familiar people and familiar objects in the home. And so another important receptive language skill is recognizing their own name. So by about 6 months old, babies also recognize and respond by glancing, turning their head, looking up, or briefly stopping their activity when they hear their name spoken aloud. And something pretty amazing happens at about 8 to 9 months old. Babies begin to communicate intentionally with a specific message or goal in mind. This is a huge shift from the reflexive communication that babies use in their early months of life, such as we were mentioning earlier, the gestures and the body movements, right? And it really does lay the foundation for saying their first word. Research tells us that there are close neural links between brain regions involved in language and motor behavior. So you recall that little brain slide that we saw earlier and how Natasha explained, the different areas where language was. Remember, for the participants who've been with us for the last couple of units, we did talk about how learning really takes, and the development of the brain itself takes place from the back to the front, right? um, and from the bottom to the top. Okay,
Yes.
so that's, it's really talking about making those connections between language and the other areas of the brain. So those connections provide support for the idea that these two symptoms are influencing each other through a lot of reciprocal, or rather back and forth interactions during this period of very rapid development. So remember, we're talking about, within a few months, right? Less than a year of babies being born, that all this is taking place. So just think about it. This rapid development is happening. So at this time, you'll see an onset of intentional communication in infants in both speech and gestures. So, for example, a baby may start saying the word hi and also waving, right, at the same time. So they're learning that connection of an action and a word. So generally, babies' early intentional communication focus on three main messages. And these are, first, to stop the adult from doing something. Second, to get the adult to do something. Or the third would be to kind of engage in that joint attention, right? That Natasha just spoke about. And in this slide, we have more detail of what these intentional communication focuses are. So again, so the first one would be for the adult to stop doing something, like for example, turning off the annoying mobile, right? Something that's making noise, or stop trying to wash the baby's face. So it doesn't want to get their face washed anymore, or end the tickle game that has stopped being fun. The second one would be to get the adult to do something, to get the adult's attention, right? So helping obtaining a desired object, like the picture you see here, the little boy in the middle is trying to reach for a toy that he really can't reach, right? So trying to get the attention of the adult to perform that action, such as also picking them up, right? The third communication would be, as I said, to do dealing with joint attention. So the baby's desire to draw an adult's attention to something he is interested in. He may give a toy to the adult, hold it out for the adult to look at, or simply point to it, like you see the baby girl here pointing at an item in the book, right? Trying to get your attention. So those are different ways that little ones communicate with intention. So earlier, Natasha mentioned babbling, and so this is when babies string together a variety of babble sounds that have the cadence of speech, but they're really not yet words. And so, we can expect this to happen between 8 to 9 months. Okay, so that's what this little one is doing, just babbling away. And so what is baby babble really, and how does it develop? Babbling is when your little one talks in stages and eventually begins to combine words to form consonant sounds or comprehensible phrases. And it usually starts with sounds like aga or ada and slowly works its way up to words that associate with meaning. The babbling stage is a sign that your baby's brain and speech functions are developing. So that's a good thing, as your baby tries to make sense of things through his first babbles and progresses on to speak a few words or even small phrases. Okay, so that's what's happening right there. That little one is babbling away. The mom is paying attention. Okay, so between 9 and 12 months old, babies are beginning to point, right? Trying to get their attention. This is a huge development in communication skills. Pointing can be used to ask a question such as, what's that? Or to express a want or need, as in, I want that. Pointing is also used as a way to share something with you, to say, look at that. Okay, so again, asking a question, expressing something they want, or kind of sharing that, that moment with you, right? Establishing that joint attention. Another skill that emerges at or around 9 months old is the ability to understand simple requests in context, such as when an adult says, can mommy have a cracker? While holding out her hand as the baby is eating crackers. So oftentimes, we really have to pay attention, right, to what they are trying to say. And so again, pointing, understanding simple requests. So not only understanding, but actually responding to those requests, right? They're starting to use gestures like shaking the head no or waving bye-bye. They're making sounds, changes in tone, sounds that sound a lot like speech, not yet speech, but they're beginning to sound like that. Saying mama and dada and exclamations like uh-oh, and they are trying to say words that you say, right? That's where that constant communication comes in, right? That's what we
Yes.
want to make sure that we're always talking to them. So beginning at about 12 months old, what happens? Ta-da! They say their first word. And this is very exciting for parents and children as they are able to reach new ways of communicating. However, learning how to talk started long before children's first birthday. In fact, research on 7 and 11-month-old infants has found that speech sounds stimulate an auditory area of the brain and regions of the cerebellum responsible for planning the motor movements for speaking. This is why being exposed to language is so critical for infants. When they hear language, their brains are already starting to figure out how to find the right movements to produce words. They're laying the foundation for language skills later on. And for those of you who participated in the previous units, you'll remember how those neurons connect. Every time, we stimulate children by talking to them and providing those positive interactions. That's what I think of when I think of this, how all those neurons are connecting and kind of laying, as I just said, the foundation for those skills to develop fully. And here's the little blue baby that I like so much.
Yes.
There is another way in which the brain is preparing itself for language learning. Okay, shortly after birth, newborns can perceive many, many speech sounds. In fact, they can perceive speech sounds that even their parents cannot detect. Some researchers believe that the newborn baby's brain is prepared to learn any human language by being capable of perceiving a wide range of speech sounds, including those they have never heard. They are, in a sense, citizens of the world because the brain doesn't know at birth whether the baby is going to have to learn Russian, English, Chinese, Korean, Swahili, or any other language. So the newborn brain has to be ready to learn any of these languages. Isn't that fascinating? The
Yes.
ability begins to diminish as the baby develops. And by the second half of the first year, which is around 6 months or so, the baby begins to lose the ability to perceive many different speech sounds and becomes especially sensitive to speech sounds that are part of the language or languages she overhears every day. So in a sense, the brain reorganizes itself from being a universal perceiver of speech sounds to becoming specialized for the speech sounds of the language the baby is going to be learning. So this reorganization helps the brain become a really excellent language learning device, as we shall see in the growth of vocabulary in the second year. So babies are very persistent in their attempts to be understood as they slowly begin adding language to their repertoire of gestures, facial expressions, and sounds. And by 11 to 12 months old, babies will persist in repeating or restating messages if adults misunderstand their intent. So this means that babies will add to their message, or change their behavior to communicate with you if you don't initially understand. Isn't that true? They
Hmm.
get their point across no matter what.
Yes.
This persistence is important because it shows their desire to communicate and to be understood. I think that is just unreal,
Amazing.
fascinating. All right, so we're gonna watch a video that will kind of sum up the information that I've covered so far, that we've really both of us covered so far in tonight's session. So as you watch it, again, listen for some of the points that we shared with you, and we're gonna chat about it on the other side, okay? This is called Crying, Cooing, and Communicating, the baby's first year. So let me launch it. And here we go. I really like that video. Don't you, Natasha?
Yes, I enjoy it. I
Yeah,
enjoy it a lot.
it really does summarize a lot of the key points that we discussed this evening, and it gives us a summary of that progression of, language development, and even adds some strategies, right, on how we can enhance their language experiences. So anything stood out for you in that video?
Yes, the way that baby on the early stage of able to communicate and understanding what's going on,
Mhm.
and the words that the way they express, the way they the mother follow the cues and expressing and getting to know what the child is saying, cooing and saying, and putting words into the words that the cooing that the child was doing.
Right. So she was expanding on that, right?
Expanding. Yes,
And
yes.
they gave good examples of receptive communication and
And
expressive,
reflective
with which we
communication. Yes.
reviewed as well. So lots of good tips there. So hope our participants enjoyed that video. And so well, someone mentioned it's the way of communication of a baby in all different steps. So it really did break it down for us, right? So I'm glad that
Hmm.
you enjoyed that. Awesome. So let's continue. So here are some strategies. Just a quick note, make sure that you download the handouts before we end tonight's session. The tips and strategies that you see here on this slide is part of the handouts for tonight. It's called Strategies to Support Communication Skills. This is part of the participant guide for this particular curriculum in Unit 3. So how adults respond to babies' communications in the early months of life really does help build that strong foundation they'll need to become great communicators, right? And communication skills really emerge slowly across the first year, but each one lays the foundation for more complex communication to come. And these skills represent a step-by-step process that takes infants from reflexive crying to their first word, to the ability to share thoughts, ideas, wants, and needs. So it's important to note, again, remember, not all children achieve these milestones at the same time, right? We have to consider that each
Yes.
child develops and learns at their own pace and on their own time. They're on their own schedule, right? um, so we need to make sure that that we're aware of that. So some of the strategies here is using a higher pitch voice, which we've discussed already, talking with them, singing songs, listening with your eyes, right? Making sure that you are constantly gazing and engaged with them, using their names, labeling common objects like we saw in the video, narrating or describing activities or routines, playing turn-taking games, reading books one-on-one with them, playing sound games with your mouth, like covering your mouth and blowing through it, or making using gestures and words together, taking turns, which is really the beginning of conversations, responding to their behavior, using sentences and expanding on that vocabulary, and absolutely using lots of repetition, which is, for those of you who joined us last time, was one of the 5 R's, right, of um, building that brain development, healthy brain development. So remember, please download the handout um, in your handout section. And someone just made a comment about how important it is that if we are mindful of those different stages, right, of um, development and
Development.
communication skills, we if
Yes.
we fear that our child is falling behind, or we do have a concern, just to make sure that we are aware of important resources that we can share with parents, things that we're observing with them. Just keep that communication open with the parents and provide support any way that we can, right? So thank you for sharing that very important point. Okay, so communication milestones for children from 12 to 18 months old. Um, Communication skills really do begin to take off during that second year of life. So toddlers are excited to communicate with adults and increasingly with their peers during those back and forth interactions, right? So this is what we considered rapid and exciting period of development. And so here are some of the milestones that we see. Okay, we see pointing to several clothing items on request. They're starting to say no more meaningfully. More meaningfully, they're starting to say no, right? They're starting to let us know how they feel and very persistent at it. They echo the last word or most pertinent word spoken. So when we say, wow, that parrot is loud, they'll say parrot. Or if we say to them, go get your shoe, they'll repeat shoe. Their vocabulary has increased to 15 to 20 words. They're using their own name to refer to themselves, such as when you ask who's there, they'll say Jaden. Um, and they imitate environmental sounds, right? Like beep beep or choo choo or rough rough, all those sounds. And so we're going to, continue talking about the milestones for this age group. And they begin to understand basic sentences. They are naming pictures in books. They're using one word to name things that they see or they want. So if I say, instead of saying I want more, they say more. They copy animal sounds, like mentioned earlier, follow simple directions, and look at what you're talking about. So their attention span is a little bit more focused. And they start combining words to form two-word sentences. Sometimes, for example, mommy ball, as if they're trying to say, mommy, I want the ball, or mommy, pass me or throw me the ball. They'll say mommy ball. So it's their way of letting us know their needs. Okay. So there is a lot going on between 18 to 24 months. Now they're using three-word sentences like mama, go car. They use about 50 plus words in their vocabulary. They're imitating or requesting new words from us. They can name 3 common items in picture books. They understand references to rooms in their house. They can identify more than 6 body parts. They can even understand a 2 separate distinct requests, so 2-step requests, and they can answer simple questions of more than a yes or a no response, right? So their vocabulary is certainly being enhanced by those constant communication attempts that they have and that we respond to. So beginning at about 18 to 24 months old, you might see what's called the language spurt or vocabulary spurt, during which toddlers may learn about 6 new words per day. That's a lot. This process is often called fast mapping. And fast mapping is really the process of rapidly learning a new word by contrasting it with a familiar word. This is important because children are enhancing, right, their language acquisition. So they're learning new words every day. So for an example, if we give a child 2 toys, one is a familiar toy that they already know, like a dog or a puppy, and the other one is an unfamiliar animal like a platypus. And when you ask that child to give you the platypus, he's going to look at both kind of by a process of elimination. He's going to say, well, that's not the platypus because that's a dog. So this has to be the platypus, right? So he's actually learning that new word. It allows him to infer that the creature that you're asking for must be the platypus. So using fast mapping is very effective in new word acquisition, with most children being able to recall the new object a week later. So this is a term that a lot of people are not familiar with. So, but I see it taking place in classrooms, don't you, Natasha?
Yes, yes.
Exactly. And so between 24 and 36 months, we're seeing the vocabulary spike up from 300 to 1,000 words. They're using 2 to 3 sentences at a time when speaking. They're naming more common items in pictures. They're now able to recite parts of nursery rhymes and familiar songs. They're understanding verbs and adjectives. They're asking what, where, and when type of questions. And most adults can't understand about 80% of what they're saying, right? So
Mhm.
it's very important that, by this time, their language is just soaring. And that's based on our effective interactions with them, right? So here we have some additional communication milestones. Again, telling stories, singing nursery rhymes, and even doing finger plays. They repeat 5-word sentences. They actually talk to themselves about recent events and about make-believe characters that they may see on TV or in books that they like, right? They're using social words that we model for them, like please, thank you, and hello. And they can name most body parts, right? They understand direction and position words, such as around, backwards, forward, inside, and underneath. And they actually show an understanding of plots in stories we read, and they can actually act them out from time to time, right? And they can respond to requests, more specific requests. So, so there's one last concept related to communication that we like to cover, and that's what's called the word gap. And this was based on research that was done in 1995 that found a gap between vocabularies of children of higher income families as compared to lower income families. And through this study, they determined that 3-year-old children from higher income families were exposed to many more words by their parents and also developed much larger vocabularies than their peers in lower income households. So on average, we see here on the slide, it says children from families from lower income heard about 616 words per hour, whereas middle class family children heard about 1,251 words per hour. And look at the jump for professional families, right? They spoke to their children about 2,153 words per hour. So it's obvious that children from professional families would hear a lot more. And in this case, the study found they determined that 30 million more words were heard by the children in professional families than those living in poverty. And since then, there's been many studies that have found that have kind of further, knowledge, right, and information on that. And the video that we have for you today, and I'm just looking at the clock and I want to be mindful of your time. This is the word gap, some information about what I just mentioned about that study. There is a handout that is available for you that is going to give you a little bit more explanation from NACI about the word gap. But I do want to share this video that is very important for us to see how one of the studies, the more recent studies, this particular one done in MIT by some scientists there, and they are finding how the interaction really affects the children's brains. Okay, so I'm going to quickly share that video with you. Let me just share it right now. It's called Beyond the 30 Million Word Gap. Pretty powerful, don't you agree?
Yes.
So yeah, so we see that from that initial study done, back in the 90s to now, all these studies are actually learning more, right? So it doesn't just have to do with the amount of words that children hear or the amount of words that they speak, but it actually really has to do with that interaction, right? With that back and forth. And I found it a very strong statement that she made at the end, saying, that the socioeconomic status cannot really be
Yes.
changed most of the time, but what can we change? We can change those interactions. We can change the back and forth engagement that we have with the
Conversation turn having building. Yes.
exactly. So with that, we are kind of wrapping up today's session. And so before we leave, and I know that we're past our time, but I appreciate all of you staying with us. Appreciate that so much. We want to end today with the reflection activity that we are going to start off our next session with, which will be next Monday, same time, same channel. And so this here, we want you just to look at this word cloud and look at some of the words that stand out to you, right? And so for the next session, please reflect on the question that we want to pose to you. What are some ways that you are going to enhance your communication experiences with your children based on everything that we discussed today? Whether it's listening, right? Encouraging their expression, um, singing to them, reading more stories, right? Saying complete sentences, taking turns, right? So just take a look briefly at that word cloud and just think of something for next time. How are you going to do that, right? How are you going to enhance those communication experiences? And some resources to consider. I always like to share a few books that are out there. Definitely not recommending that you go out and buy them, but these are available online. Oftentimes, information about them and what they provide. So definitely, if you're interested, those are available. And some resources used today, certainly 0 to 3 for articles, videos, and blogs. Parenting First for articles. NACI, a big one, right? That has also some videos and some other resources for parents and teachers. Hanen.org has really great articles and information on developmental skills of children. The CDC also on milestones and pathways, which is the first video that Natasha shared with us earlier. They have a lot of really good resources for parents as
Videos.
well.
Yes. A lot of resources.
Again, 0 to 3, they are super engaged in the community. They provide lots of resources for parents and for staff. You can become an advocate. You can find resources, information on trainings and conferences for professionals as well. Please download the handouts and remember that there will be a post test and a survey at the end of this session. Please make sure you complete them both. And again, if you have any additional questions, you can put them in the chat now, or you can reach out to us. This is our information, our contact information at the ELC. If you cannot download the handouts, hopefully you'll be able to, but if you cannot, just please reach out and we will make sure that we send them out via email as well. So with that, we thank you. We went over a little bit. I apologize for
Yes.
that, but I thank all of you for sticking around. We appreciate you. We value you. We understand that it's been a long day and it's a Monday too, a rainy Monday, but we thank you all for being here and for participating and engaging with our conversation on communication. Natasha?
Thank you for joining us again. Once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you, hearing you, seeing you next week. And in the meantime, remember to read, talk, take turn, and all the words that we saw earlier in the cloud.
Absolutely. And
Make
be
sure, yes,
prepared. Yeah, be prepared to
and
share
be
next
ready.
Monday.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
go to the ELC main webpage and then you can register through the calendar of events there for next Monday's session at 7. Okay. So thank you
All
again.
right.
Stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you now.
Thanks, Tiffany. All right.
You are very welcome.
Awesome. Okay, so I think with that, I double check one last time the chat box and see if there's any questions. No, everyone's saying goodbye and thank you. All right, everyone, have a good night. Logging off.